Welcome to Choose the Nickel. I'm your host, George Bailey. My co-founder and technical support is the gorgeous Christina Bailey. This podcast is about giving kids financial freedom. We're interviewing fascinating people for their insights about how children learn to be financially savvy. Our guests come from diverse, sometimes conflicting schools of thought, and we love the opportunity to learn from them. We encourage all to weigh our guests' ideas on how to help children thrive, both financially and in general. We invite you to visit our website at www.choosethenickel.com, subscribe to our newsletter, and try out the things we are learning on the podcast. Our next guest is Carol Weisman, internationally known speaker, trainer, consultant, president of Board Builders, and author of Raising Charitable Children. Carol specializes in volunteerism, fundraising, and governance. She has worked with a wide range of clients from Sing Omaha to the National Council of Voluntary Organizations in London, England, to the Bermuda Healthcare Foundation. She has served on 40 boards and has been president of 9. Ladies and gentlemen, Carol Weisman. Carol Weisman, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So I just got done reading your book, and I really enjoyed it. Your book is titled Raising Charitable Children, and it's a very apt book for the subject matter with which we deal. I just want to know from you, what was it that inspired you to write that book?
I write books for two reasons. One is to share something I know, and the other is to learn something new. And this was in the latter category. I had done a few things that friends were interested in, but then I wanted to go further and learn from other people. I sent out an email to a couple hundred people, and I said, what did you do that either made you charitable, or what are you doing to make your own children charitable? And I got about 100 responses, but mainly they were things that kids were doing. And I finally kind of culled through all of it and got to what they were doing or their parents had done.
Got it. So you got it from the people who had had direct experience with the subject matter.
Exactly. And so I learned a lot.
One of the things that you said in the book that really jumped out to me, there is a portion of the book when you start noticing that these kids are getting out and they're serving. And then you say, how did these kids manage to pull off these acts of charity and volunteerism? How did they get to this place? And what did the adults in their lives do to make it happen? I guess the reason why that struck me is because sometimes when I watch kids going out and doing great things, and there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, there's something really right about that. But one of the fears that I have is that they are just doing it because, mom and dad put them up to it. Mom and dad have really put the entire thing together. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think at some ages and with some kids, that's the way it is, and I have no problem with that. So, for instance, I had a family friend whose kids were off school, and they were sleeping till noon, and she was getting up at 6 to get work done. And so she got them up one morning. They were high school boys, and she dumped them off at a Christmas tree lot and told the owner that they were volunteering. They had no idea. She said, sleeping till noon or 1 isn't okay. You need to do something to give back. And they had such a good time. They came back every year and for the rest of the holiday until Christmas. And they were Jewish. That's the best part.
Nice. I like that. Added touch right there. And my own thoughts on this are that you have to get them started somehow. It's not like kids have this innate part of their nature that says, you know what, I want to go out and serve. So I think that it's okay, at least on a certain level, and you want to get them to that point naturally where they're doing it for the love of what they're doing.
Well, and I think if you ask most kids, honey, would you rather watch cartoons on Saturday morning, Xbox, or go and pack sandwiches? It's way between cartoons and Xbox.
Oh,
so, yeah.
It's that natural desire. Do you think that there's a point at which parents can go overboard, though? I think that you and I both agree that there needs to be at least a level of encouragement, but is there a point at which parents go overboard?
Oh, absolutely. And one of my favorite stories about that was I was working with a relatively new philanthropist. He was in his 50s, had earned a bucket of money, had sold his company, and was just starting to think about how to use the money effectively to change the world. His son was 9, and he was having the son donate 1/3 of his allowance. And the kid finally said to the dad, "What percentage of your money up till now have you given away?"
Yeah.
The dad said, "Net or gross?" And the kid, who was 9, said, "I hear stalling."
Nice.
And he said, "I don't think I should have to give away a greater percentage than you plan to give away or have given away. And so I'm giving away 33%. And the dad went back, and at our next meeting, he said 2%.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So the kid went down to 10%, and the dad went up to 10%.
Wow.
He was a very bright little guy. I really liked him.
That's some pretty good negotiation skills right there. They better keep him up on that. Keep him developing that skill.
I would hire him as my lawyer.
Oh, yeah. That's impressive. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You know, and good for the kid for setting that kind of an example. I mean, the funny thing is that once kids get that giving bug, that sometimes they can be a lot more charitable in some ways than the parents. And you warn in your book about this same problem, that sometimes even the kids can go a little bit overboard. It's up to the parents to be able to have some boundaries so that the kids are not like giving away the home, giving away the family welfare that is enabling them to give in the first place.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I have to tell you a funny story that you and I recently met for lunch. Well, that same day, I got home and I decided to finish up a book that I had been reading called Make Your Kid a Money Genius, Even If You're Not, by Beth Kobliner. And the chapter that I started on, I mean, this was within 2 hours of my getting home from having lunch with you. I'm reading through Beth Kobliner's section about how to raise charitable kids, not necessarily titled the same. And she started quoting from your book.
Oh,
so it was great, you know. And you wrote your book, though. You wrote your book back in about, what was it, 2006, somewhere around there?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so it's been around, and it's a terrific resource. So I want to say to listeners, definitely, if you get the chance, it's a great book. It's a terrific addition to your library, Raising Charitable Children. But you've also put out another book this year called Planned Giving Basics. I have a copy. I have not yet read it, but what kind of a preview can you give us?
It's really for professionals, to be perfectly honest, who are going to be helping people give planned gifts, meaning gifts in their estate. But it does have cartoons. So
okay, good.
And
I'm covered right there.
Yeah. This is for people who are working with nonprofits, whether volunteers or staff, who would like to get a planned giving program going. The reason I think that's important is that the average planned gift is 200 times an annual gift.
Wow.
So you can have a lot of trivia nights and one planned gift can take care of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I always want my clients to work smart and not hard. Getting involved in planned giving is working smart.
Well, it's great. And I think that luckily we do have a number of estate planners and financial professionals I know who listen to our program. I'm going to check it out. I'm excited to read it. And I'm excited that you're on this drive to get people to give their money and to give it intelligently. Do you have any tips about giving your money intelligently that you'd like to share? I
tend to give, because I work with so many nonprofits, to people that I know and trust. So if they appear ethical, there may be a sociopath in the bunch. But if I care about the mission, but even more, if there's someone who's going to steward my money and make sure that it goes to the right place, then I'm much more likely to give. And I give across the sectors. So it may be a humane society, and it may be a ballet company, and maybe a social service organization or school. So I'm pretty all over the place. I'm not very focused in the sense that I didn't have a child that died of SIDS or a family trait other than cellulite, which is one of my big causes, is to eliminate cellulite. I don't have something innately important to me. So I look for good leaders. That makes the difference to me. I also give when someone asks. I've had my company Board Builders for 25 years, and only one person in 25 years has asked me for a planned gift.
Oh, really? What was that?
Yeah, it was Diane Belk with the Girl Scouts. She asked me for a planned gift, and it's now in my will. And I have to say, I had a terrible experience with the Girl Scouts. And we learned really vital skills in those days. I'm almost 70. So I learned things like how to set a table, how to pick up luggage. You have to bend at the knees, not at the waist. But it's so different now. And I really listened to Diane. They are one of 4 charities mentioned in my will. Just to go on with that for a second, I'll just explain how I chose to do it, and people can do whatever they want, obviously. But I have 2 sons, and they each get 40%. 10% goes to nieces and nephews and people that have helped me on my journey, and the other 10% goes to charity. 2% to 4 charities, and the last 2% are for my grandchildren to decide what's important in their lives.
Yeah.
They're currently 4, 7, and 10, and I'm feeling pretty good today, but you never know. But when I was a little girl, I was afraid of the Russians coming and bombing. My grandchildren are going through drills for an active shooter in their classroom. They have very different concerns than I did as a child. So I want it to be meaningful for them, not necessarily something I care about.
Yes. Yes. And I like that you in your book tend to deal with that. There is this discovery process that you have to do with a child to find his or her passion, the thing that this kid really wants to give to. And I do think that that's important. I really agree with you there.
I have a rough one right now. I had dinner with my grandson last night, and his birthday is 11/11/10. It's the only one I remember. And he's turning 8. And I said to him, I'm going to give you a gift, and we discussed what it was, and then I'm going to give you a gift to a charity. And even though he's turning 8, he doesn't quite get that. Some kids get it at 4, some kids get it at 10. I said, what's made you happy in the last year? And he said, skateboarding.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be looking up and trying to find out if there's a skateboard association or a program for skateboarders. But because he's 7, he's not doing the research. My older kids do.
Yeah.
To find out how I can honor what he really enjoys. And I asked him if there was anything in the world he'd like to change. And he said, not really. And one of my sons, when I asked him that question, said, I'd like to be an only child.
Yeah. Oh, man.
I said, that's not happening. You're not dumping your
everybody has to have equal passion about that type of a charity, and it ain't happening. I agree with you. Wise judgment right there.
Yeah.
There's this one part in the book, you say something else that really jumped out to me, and this ties in with your grandson. If a child thinks that every time he gives, he loses something, then the joy of giving is diminished. How do you get around that? How do you help kids to make that connection that, look, you're not losing when you give?
Well, I think parents do things like say, you have enough toys. Well, the child may not believe they have enough toys.
Yeah.
And so to give to children with less, they're not ready to do it. They're not ready to part with things. I remember when my grandson was ready to get rid of a pacifier. My daughter-in-law, who's brilliant, said, are you ready to wrap them up and send them to a child who doesn't have a pacifier? And he said no, and he said no. And finally he came to her and said yes. So they wrapped up all of his pacifiers and sent them to my other son, his uncle. Like, you're not sending used pacifiers to anyone.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I was like, I don't know if I like the direction this is going in, Carol, but you know.
Yeah, no. So my other son opens this package, and they taped up the package together, and they went to the post office. My other son wound up with a bunch of used pacifiers.
Nice.
Which I'm sure he'll keep if he has children later.
But hey, your grandchild was giving what he was able to give. And you meet them where they're at. I love that. You know, even if it's like, oh, thank you.
But he was in charge.
Yes.
And he made the decision. And so she didn't say there are children in Russia or China or India that need pacifiers.
Yeah, no guilt
that's
tripping.
baloney.
Yeah,
No,
I agree with that.
when are you ready?
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with birthday parties where all the proceeds go to charity. I think if the kid brings it up, that's terrific. However, if the child's not ready, then it's miserable. It's a birthday party with no presents. And most children aren't ready for that. The parent happens to be ready, but the kid's not. So I wouldn't pull that on your kid.
So one of the questions that we've talked about earlier, and I would love to bring this up again because I think that it's an important topic. When I first looked at your book, Raising Charitable Children, I thought to myself, well, there are two ways that one could look at this word charitable. There is the modern sense of the word, which is a charitable cause, a cause giving it to a nonprofit organization. And then there is the biblical sense of charity as in love towards all mankind, a deep and abiding love. And so I knew when I read the book that I was going to get a lot of information about the first type of charity, and I did. It was really useful. But I want to get a few of your views on that second type of charity, because that's also a type of charity that I want to teach my children, not just to give for the sake of giving, and that's good, and it's a start, but also finding that deeper happiness in giving and in loving their fellow human beings. What are some of your thoughts about that?
It's interesting because I think it also has to do with love of self. And the reason is, I believe we shouldn't teach children that we always give to people with less. Because there's so many institutions that our children are part of where they benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So when I go to the zoo with the kids or my grandkids, I say, look at this polar bear, Heffen.
Yeah.
See all those names? Those are people who love children who've never even met you and want you to benefit from their generosity and to feel good that you're getting as well as giving.
Yes.
Because a lot of us don't see ourselves as recipients of charity, yet we are every single day. If you look up a nonprofit website, whether it's about breast cancer or anything, the environment, whatever, somebody else is paying for that, and we're the beneficiary.
Yes.
So we're not always the ones who are giving. We need to be grateful also for receiving.
I like that. And it does make you more grateful. And I have to say that living in a city that has some terrific venues for children to go to, the botanical garden, the zoo. You mentioned the zoo, and I just think I actually now, and I feel like I'm such a goofball for this, but I read those plaques when I'm walking by.
I do too.
And I think oh, that was really nice of them. As a kid, I just could care less. But you're right that even now as an adult, I hope, if not fully aware, pretty aware of all of the good things going on around me that enable me to live a happy and peaceful existence.
Also, our children need to show love, but they also need to feel love. And
Yes.
I think when you go into a place like the zoo or the botanical garden or any number of places, almost all of our children were born in hospitals where the neonatal unit was donated.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a great example.
We start our lives being born into a place where strangers have given money to make sure that you get the best care. So we start out being loved, and it's easier to love others when you love yourself and know that you're loved.
That goes back to parents as well in terms of my question about teaching children to be charitable in the loving sense. It's something that your children will feel a lot more secure if you show them that deep love that you have for them, and that they will be able to give that in return, and that they will understand, yes, although there may come some vulnerability with that, there's also a lot of welcome blessings. That's a great point.
Exactly.
You were once a child, and I would love to hear a little bit about Carol Weisman as a child. Tell me what kind of a kid you were.
I was just kind of an ordinary kid. I wasn't a good student, and I didn't find out so much later that I was dyslexic. My children are dyslexic, and my mother was. So all of a sudden it became clear why I wasn't doing better in school. And I was always in trouble for talking, always. And we found some of my old report cards years ago when my mother died, and my kids said, every report card began the same. Carol is a very sweet child. However, went downhill from there.
Yeah.
She would pay more attention to her own work and less attention to her classmates. She would do much better in school. And then they found this one report card, and my son said, "What is this D in Latin?" And I just whirled on him, and I said, "I've talked to your grandfather about it, and I've dealt with it, and I'm not discussing it." So when you have a parent that wasn't a good student,
Yeah.
and then I sort of worked out strategies, and I got through 2 masters, but it was hard. I came from a somewhat unique home in those days because my mother was the only mother at my public grade school that worked outside the home.
Mm.
And there was one other mother that was divorced in the whole grade school. So this world is completely different. One of the things that my father really tried to do with us was teach us morality and ethics around money. My favorite story about that is he and my mother were in Amsterdam at the diamond market, and she saw something she liked, and she said, "No, I don't want it. It's too expensive." And so my father, a little while later, said to the man who was helping them, "Would you show me the bathroom?" And he said, "It's right over there." And my father said, Could you take me there?" And the guy is going, "What on earth?" My father dragged him in the bathroom and said, "I want to buy that brooch for my wife.
Oh.
Go and get it, and I'll give you the money." So he said,
By the way, I got to say,
you.
smooth move. Okay, smooth move.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
So he dragged this guy in and stayed there. And he said to my mom, "I better check on your husband." Picked up the brooch and gave it to him, and then he paid for it. So 3 months later, when my mother's birthday, he gave her the brooch. And
Wow.
she said, "How did you get it in the country?" And he said, "I pinned it on the inside of my underwear." And she said, "You smuggled it in?" At which point, we're all going, "Way to go, Dad." And my father is appalled. So I have an uncle,
Yeah.
my mother was from Germany, who wrote passports for Jews during the war. That was his business.
Wow.
So he was a forger. So I thought, oh, this is just more of the same. So my father was just appalled, and he said, "You don't ever do anything like this." And my mother was just laughing her head off. So my father wrote a letter to the customs people, told him what happened, and asked how much he owed. And he showed us all the letter. And because you had to be moral about all this, they wrote him a letter back, and I'm sure that if they're still alive, they're still laughing.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And they said, "Dear Dr. Weisman, we hope your wife enjoyed the brooch, and we appreciate your honesty, but there's no way for us to collect back taxes."
Wow.
All the best, you know. And so while he's trying to teach us morality, my mother's just laughing her head off.
Yeah, yeah. You know what, though? That is such a great example. I mean, that's great that he would do that he would have the courage to look a little bit, silly, but give them a great laugh. I'm sure that they loved that. I'm sure that they got that and it made their day.
They must be saying, "Who is this idiot who wants to pay back taxes on a diamond brooch?"
That's great. That's great. So then for you yourself as a kid, how did experiences like this influence you?
It really showed the difference between my two parents. They were very, very, very different. My father was from a Russian Jewish family. He was conceived in Russia, born in the United States. And my mother was from an extremely wealthy German family, German Lutheran, and she went to medical school during World War II and came over in 1947. And so they approached money very differently. I remember overhearing my mother say to my father, "Carol is not going to private school. I will not have my daughter turn into some French-speaking debutante." And my father thought this was really important. And what's funny is I know a lot of those women now, and they're friends of mine. And my mother was actually wrong. They don't speak French anymore.
Okay.
So, they may have been debutantes. But
Gotcha.
So a lot of women would have been in my class at this private school, but they approached money very differently. However,
Yes.
they were both extremely generous with relatives. That's where it really started for me. My mother's house was bombed during the war, and they were always sending money back for years. And so the charity began at home during those years in the late 40s and early 50s. My father put one of my cousins through medical school. My husband and I put a niece through college. So it really did, in our family, having one parent from wealth and one parent from poverty, start at home with family members.
Yes, yes. There's another part to this that I find very interesting, and that is that you had this tie to World War II. And you talked about, was it your uncle, again, who wrote or forged passports for Jews? Oh, my gosh. Yes. What kind of pride does that give you, or how does that feel to you?
It makes me really proud as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
We're
all, all of us entrepreneurs, we're all kind of circumventing the system in a way,
Yeah.
Albeit maybe not on that level, but yeah, I get it.
It really was a business arrangement, but it had a purpose. And I think everybody who owns a business can have meaning in their business, whether they're forging passports or making tires. It doesn't make any difference. It's the kindness with which you treat other people and that basic generosity that you make a service or a product available and that you make it as good as you can because it may be someone's life.
Yeah.
Not frequently, but it could be. It was funny. Years later, after my father died, my mother's old boyfriend showed up. He had a driver's license and he only had one eye. And I said, Clive, how did you get the driver's license? He said, oh, your uncle made it for me. He was still keeping his hand in a little bit.
That's great. Oh, that's rich. I love that. I love that story. Okay. Now I've got a couple more questions that I definitely want to get to. If I can stop laughing, oh my gosh, that was great. Man, I got to get to know your uncle. So, in any case, not for any purpose that I have specifically in mind. Okay. Of all of the things that parents teach their children or ingrain in their children, ideas that are false about money or business, what is your least favorite?
There's so many, and you'll be shocked. It's this notion that if you work hard, that you'll do well. And that's not necessarily true. You have to work smart. And also, it's this doing it on your own. And I don't think any of us get any place doing anything on their own. I think you have to find mentors and people to trust and help you. This sort of independent spirit that built the West really did work, but doesn't work anymore. And when you really look back at all those John Wayne movies, they were traveling in wagon trains together.
Yeah.
And so you can go farther together. This myth of being independent, we're not. And I see a lot of famous people who were born on third base, got home, and thought they did it on their own. And that goes for both parties, both the Democrats and the Republicans. They see themselves. I remember hearing George Bush II talking about being a self-made man. And I thought, excuse me?
Yeah.
This woman I mentioned earlier, Diane Bell, who inspired me to give a planned gift to the Girl Scouts, that woman was self-made. She did not have indoor plumbing until she was 11. She's my age. Her dad died when she was 12. Her sister died when she was 17. She worked constantly, and she had 17 scholarships to college, and she still had to work. And she wound up owning this big company and doing incredibly well, and she has $1 million challenge on the table for the Girl Scouts. Now, that's a self-made person, and they're few and far between.
Yeah. So many of us have been impacted, born through, I think, by other people. I think this goes back to your message of gratitude, that if you look around for reasons to be grateful, you will find them, because there's so much to be grateful for, and there's so many people who have really helped us to whatever point. I really appreciate that message. Thank you.
We didn't do it on our own. Even the fact that I speak standard, although nasal, English is because of the family I was born in.
I think your English is pretty good. Nothing to apologize there. So, and it's funny. What I love is that you had dyslexia. You have written books. And I assume that
you've
read many.
Able to read them.
That's great. But you're out there, you've overcome a lot of challenges. I think that's great. I have one more question for you. It's the same question I asked to all of my guests. If you could think of one just absolute favorite charitable cause, somebody who maybe doesn't get a shout out enough and you would like to give a shout out to, what would that be? Who would that be?
I would think right now it's the St. Louis Nonprofit News. And the reason is it's an online newspaper, an e-zine or whatever you want to call it, that brings communities together. You can find out about how you can collaborate with others. If you give a dime, it turns into $1. If you give $1, it turns into 100. It really encourages people to know how to give time and money. It's a connection point. And that's what I really like about the St. Louis Nonprofit News and any group that really forms coalitions and brings people together.
So you like the fact that they have provided a megaphone to a lot of nonprofits all at the same time.
Exactly. It saves nonprofits so much time and money not to go down the wrong path.
Who is the founder of that?
Larry Levin, who has been active forever in charitable works. He started the Ladue Education Foundation 10 or 12 years ago. He's on the board of, I believe it's called the St. Louis County Symphony. He was an attorney. He still is an attorney, but he worked for the St. Louis Jewish Light as the publisher. Now he's started this venture because he's seen the nonprofit arena and thought people could be working much more effectively.
Yes. And sometimes it just takes that one clear mind to kind of tell us, okay, this is the thing that we could be doing so much more effectively that makes all the difference.
Sometimes what's interesting is some people say we have too many nonprofits, and that's always debatable. But sometimes, like for instance in domestic violence, if you have one in the city and you have one in the county, you can swap women so that their abusers can't find them.
Yes.
And so you do need some kind of density, but they have to work together. That's one of the things that Larry works on.
I suppose that it's context specific when we say that. And yeah, I have seen some people kind of reinvent the wheel, but at the same time, there's a lot of hurt out there and there's a lot of potential to help people.
And there's a lot of beauty to spread.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, exactly. And what's great is that we can train our kids to do part of that work. What a great blessing to be able to include them in that. And then hopefully down the road that they will see all the good that they can do and keep on doing that good.
Well, I was going to name the book How Not to Raise a Miserable Grubby Brat, but I decided to go for the positive. But we all worry about our children's greed. We want 2 pieces of Halloween candy, not 1.
Yes.
I think we all have to fight against that.
But it's so worth the fight. Or at least that's what they tell me right now. Right now, all of my kids are 11 and under, so we're still crossing fingers in our home, but I'm taking your advice. I've read through your book. I'll probably refer to it again and again. And I want to thank you so much, Carol, for taking the time to be on our show.
Thank you for having this show. I think it's really important.
Everybody else, thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the interview and found useful ideas about things you can do with your kids. Be sure to check the show notes at www.choosethenickel.com for links to names, books, and other resources we discussed in today's show. Also, please subscribe to our newsletter and visit our contact page where you can give us feedback. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and YouTube, and you can follow Choose the Nickel on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We invite you to share Choose the Nickel with your friends and join us in our quest to teach kids financial freedom.